I interview a lot of old people, and so it's all right. Um, so Leal, I've been meaning to get you back on the podcast, and I regret that this occasion is the occasion for it. Um, but as friends in the faith, I guess the first thing I want to ask is, um, how has Saturday and these days since, what has it been like for you personally, um, as a Jew and as someone with friendships and relationships in Israel?
You know, um, I am a ninth generation Israeli. I served in the Israeli army. I've been in several, you know, gun battles. I've survived a bunch of wars. I know from this. I'm no squish, but when I started receiving frantic phone calls from my family in Israel, on not only on Shabbat morning, which is an unusual thing because usually we observe the Sabbath,
Hmm.
but also a holiday. It was the most joyous holiday, Simchat Torah, when we celebrate the finishing of the reading of the Torah and the beginning of the new cycle of reading the Bible anew. Um, I rushed to look at these horrendous images and was shocked not only to see what was happening, but to see in an unprecedented manner these atrocities being live streamed on the internet, to see these demons from Hamas, who I think have forfeited any claim to human form, um, rushing into the home of an 85-year-old woman, grabbing her phone, torturing and murdering her while filming their crimes on her own phone, and then posting it to her own Facebook page so that her family may see these atrocities. That's a level of barbarism that even ISIS, I think, pales in comparison. To see all that in real time, as entire communities in Israel are still under fire, under siege by hundreds and thousands of terrorists, to feel so helpless and so wounded, to look at the worst mass massacre of Jews since the Holocaust
Yeah, yeah.
happening.
Like, talk about like what kind of psychic shock is that?
It's indescribable. The modern state of Israel was erected in large part to guarantee the Jews, never again go like sheep to the slaughter. That we have a means to protect ourselves in our own sovereign nation, in our own homeland, where we could stand strong and be free. To see that type of really, I mean, a bunch of people use this imagery, this Palestinian Einsatzgruppen, this Nazi death units. I don't want to be too graphic, but the things that I have seen and the reports that I've heard from survivors are deeply reminiscent. I'll use one gruesome fact. Yesterday, we received reports of 40 dead babies, many of them decapitated. This is not something that we have seen on this planet for many, many, many years. And so the sense of heartbreak, the sense of grief, and the sense of rage are immense. And I know you'll understand when I say that really the only panacea for our souls, and I think a lot of people feel this way, is prayer. Because that very evening, after spending a whole day immersed in these terrors, here's what we did. We took our family and we went to synagogue, and we raised our glass l'chaim, to life, uh, and we danced with the Torah, and we're grateful for this occasion to celebrate our faith and to celebrate our community and to be together and to show the world that this light will always, always, always triumph over darkness.
Um, there's a number of questions I want to ask you, Leal. can you help? So it shouldn't be the case, or why is it the case that I woke up seeing footage of what was going on Twitter that I didn't see in the news until I went to bed that night. Um, so and you know, depending on which channel I switched to, there seemed to be a lot of hand wringing about whether to describe um, the terrorists as terrorists. Fighters and soldiers were terms that I heard. Um, you know, help. So someone who pays attention to the news but is not deeply immersed in Israeli politics and news and all of this, help us understand these filters that we might not even perceive.
Look, I think there are two. I think there are two layers to this answer. The first, and just in the interest of complete honesty and transparency, is logistical and practical. The fight on the ground lasted a very long time. The surprise was so complete, the shock was so thorough. It took until mid to late afternoon, 8 or 9 or 10 hours after this attack had begun, for Israel to regain even a semblance of control. Up until then, it was very, very difficult to gain any good information, especially as the images coming on social media were so horrendous as to really defy belief. So I do not fault anyone who took a minute to get to the story and get it correct, and especially someone beholden to yay good old fashioned journalistic values of actually doing reporting rather than just repeating
Hmm. Hmm.
hearsay. But here's what I do want to say, and that pertains to the second part of your question, which is the choice of language. I think this horrendous massacre shows us in a very, very clear way where people stand in their hearts and in their souls, what their value system is, what their notion of morality is, and how they perceive themselves as a human being. If you are rushing in the midst of these images to try and root yourself into what you believe is a intellectually defensible system of both sides, and it's a cycle of violence, and it's important to remember the context, and you call this morality, and you call this intelligence, and you call this being fair and balanced. I think you have completely, completely, completely lost the thread. If, like a normal human being, a person who believes, like we believe, that all people were created in the image of God, you look at beheaded babies and raped women and dead children, and you say to yourself, this is an absolute moral travesty that should not be excused or defended. Then there's hope for you yet. And I was very proud. I'm usually very critical of President Biden's policies, especially vis-a-vis strengthening the Iranians. But I was very proud to see him walk up yesterday to the microphone and say, this is an act of sheer evil. Sometimes, even for us modern sophisticates who like to think of things as very nuanced and intricate, there is good and there is evil in this world. And if you can't tell them apart, you are doomed.
You had a very powerful piece, I think on Sunday, uh, at Tablet Magazine, where you 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 made 2 points that struck home to me. One is that we can argue about conditions in the West Bank and the process that led to the creation of Israel, and all of these things, but at root there is a hatred of Jews in parts of the world that we are naive not to take seriously. Um, and you connected that with a call to pray like Isaiah for vengeance. And I that's there's an emotional and theological honesty to that I'm really grateful for you to
It's
articulate.
thank you for saying this, and if it wasn't so gruesome and so tragic, and if we weren't burying so many people and still anxious about the fate of anywhere between 150 and 300 hostages, civilian hostages, taken into Gaza, including many American citizens, we would really be having a very interesting theological debate right now, because I really think how you respond to this question really says a lot about who you are and how you see the world. Some years ago, former President Obama was asked, why he was so eager to strike a deal with Iran when this genocidal regime sort of really cheers on Holocaust denialism, on calls for mass murder of Americans and Jews. And he said something like, "Well, you could be a bigoted, racist, anti-Semite and still care deeply about your economic interests and be a rational player," which struck me as a really kind of telling glance into this worldview that truly believes that we're all at heart materialist creatures. We care first and foremost about our bank accounts and the well-being of our children and whatever the kind of very earthly needs we may have may be, and that our beliefs are almost like luxury items that we wear like a Fendi purse whenever we dress nicely and go to church on Sunday or shul on Saturday. And it struck me like a profound misunderstanding of first of all of what people are like, and second of all, especially people who profess to do things in the name of faith. And I think Hamas has made it very, very clear, delivering their own completely thwarted reading of Islam, that their first and foremost chief strategy, priority, and concern on this earth is to kill as many Jews as they can. It's not Israelis, it's Jews. The Hamas Charter, which I recommend, it's a lovely bedtime reading, says very clearly Jews, in their infinite power, have a conspiracy that controls the world, and therefore we must rid the world of them. That's not subtle language, and that leaves very little room for interpretation, even for a university professor. So I think this is kind of an interesting wake up call for a lot of people who aren't exactly people of faith to understand that there's a different system of morality out there that is proving much more prevalent and much more pressing.
What you did a forum for Tablet on Monday, and I don't know which participant it was, um, made the comment that it feels as though kind of progressive woke ideology in the West morphed into medieval blood libel.
Hmm.
And I don't it it just astonishes me the extent to which anti-Semitism seems to be acceptable and even vogue on the extremes of both political sides. There's a lot of George Soros talk on like the extreme right, but then there's a lot of anti-Israeli rhetoric on the left. And is this worse than it was? Like, am I just being made aware of this now?
You know, that's a fascinating question. We have seen the rise of anti-Semitism in America kind of spike steadily for the past at least a decade, aided and abetted by social media and by all kinds of forums and apps that allow for vitriolic echo chambers to sort of amplify the opinions of bigots and find and recruit like-minded zealots. Um, I think you're definitely correct. It is both on the right and on the left. But what truly worries me is less that kind of sense of balance. Oh, look, isn't it nice that there's something that Americans of all stripes can agree on? We all agree we don't like the Jews, but more the fact that so much of this language has become completely acceptable in institutions and circles that really ought to know better. If a bunch of yokels in a pickup truck with a tiki torch saying, we don't like them Yids. I say, okay, well, unfortunate, but thankfully there are about 30,000 of you, which is exactly the same number of you that have been around in 1974, and likely the same number of you if we're fortunate that we will have, in 20 years from now. But to see university professors, to see university students, to see journalists and opinion writers, to see policymakers express these views in ways that are so moderate seeming and sounding and intellectualized and sort of rationalized, and to see that go without response. Just yesterday, or rather the day before yesterday, a vast number of Harvard students came out in a statement. These are the most privileged human beings in America, in the foremost institution of higher education in this country, saying that the people to blame for the murder of 1,000 innocent human beings, including beheaded babies, are, of course, the Jewish victims, because apparently we still occupy Gaza despite the fact that we left it in 2005. When you see this kind of, absolute ahistorical, nonsensical, kind of fulminating folly at Harvard, and then you see the university doing really nothing in particular about it. You see it from NYU law students. You see it really all over the place. You feel that there is something more troubling afoot, because this isn't just some moron shouting on the internet to 300 of his crazy friends. These are the people who tomorrow will be heads of corporations, heads of newspapers, heads of government, and that, I think, is a situation that requires some grave thinking and some vast course recalculation.
So uh, I hear this construction a lot, especially in the mainline Protestant Christian circles that I live and work in. So I'll hear someone say, you have to make a distinction between the nation state of Israel and the Jewish people. How do you deconstruct uh, a sentence like that?
Well, first of all, Jason, let me tell you with amazing, great, searing pain that you hear the same exact sentiment in many, many, many non-Orthodox Jewish communities,
Okay.
which shocks and pains me, because none of this is complicated. Uh, we pray 3 times a day, um, for the return to Zion. We mean not just the return to our sovereign homeland, which fortunately Zionism, which is Judaism's sort of like spiritual national liberation movement, guided us to, the state that was established in 1948, but also in a more spiritual sense, an acknowledgement that the Jewish people are the indigenous people of the land of Israel, and the land of Israel plays a foundational, fundamental part of our faith, of our worship, of our observance, of our practice. It is the beating heart of this entire religion. We cannot imagine being Jewish without it, which is why, for thousands of years in forced, violent exile, we continue daily to pray for return. We still conclude every Seder on Passover, every celebration of Passover, by saying Lashana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, to claim that there's some magical way in which you could say, oh, well, you could be a Jew, but Israel is a different thing. Israel is completely central to it. Now, you could argue about the policies of this government and that, and I think that's completely fair game. In fact, why not? That's, let's have at it. But when you try to decouple the land of Israel from the Jewish people, you're committing, really a theological, moral, and spiritual crime.
That's really good. And that makes me think. So I've been preaching my way through the Book of Revelation um,
It's a good one.
since the summer, and it has struck me again and again how it's a bewildering book to a lot of Christians only if you're not that familiar with like Ezekiel and Daniel and other books of the Christian Old Testament. Um, because so Revelation 14 last Sunday was so the prophet sees the Lamb in Zion, and then chapter 15 he hears in the throne room of heaven the song of the Lamb coupled with the song of Moses. And so it's in the New Testament too that the importance of place is indistinguishable from the
You
promise.
know, it's so foundational. Let's take it even a few steps back. Mad props to Ezekiel and to Revelations, but let's go all the way back. Um, Here are the Israelites, 600,000 of them standing approximately, standing at the foothills of the mount, and God comes out. This is the height of the biblical drama, and says, "You will be unto me, a holy nation, a kingdom of priests." Good night, everybody. And people at the bottom are probably left asking, hold on, dude, some questions. Are children automatically chosen after us? Can you get unchosen? Like, what are the terms and conditions of this contract that we just signed? And the most amazing thing I think about this whole thing is this: if you truly are kind of trying to think your way rationally through this and say, okay, well, if they're a chosen people, the most reasonable thing to do with said chosen people is to divide them into small groups, send two of them in pairs to every corner of the world, so that they may help spread the word of God. That is usually how testament works. Instead, God commands these people to go and inherit one very specific place and dwell there because it's the promised land. I think that is a brilliant theological device because I think what it teaches us is we don't want abstractions. We don't want
Mm.
vague talk of goodness. We want you to go to this specific place, your indigenous homeland, and help transform it into a living example of justice, of truth, and of God's word. If you could do that, you will inspire so many more people because they will see this done right here on earth, not in some heavenly realm, not in the books, not in the scrolls, not in the words of the prophet, but here on the ground, which is why I really think the modern state of Israel is nothing short of a miracle, which is why so many people love it so passionately, and sadly, why so many people who oppose this story that you and I believe in so completely hate it so passionately.
That's really, yeah. I think that's that the offense at the heart of Judaism and then Christianity is God choosing to be identified by a particular history and a particular place, and it's not so God has a proper name. It's not a universal abstraction,
Mhm.
and that I mean, yeah, you can't get past that offense.
And look, and the book of Isaiah puts it in the most beautiful terms. Like, if sometimes people say, like, what's the point of the Bible? What does the Bible teach? Looking for a kind of pithy, kind of Cliff's Notes version. I actually have it. Spoiler alert! I'm going to spoil the whole Bible for you. Ready? The whole Hebrew Bible. Here it is. It's this one verse in Isaiah that goes, "Beiti bet filai kareh lekol ha'amim," and my house shall be a house of worship for all nations. Now, if you think about that verse, first of all, it's my house, my specific house, the temple in Jerusalem, from which the entire world we believe was created, and from which justice and light shall spring forth. And second of all, the idea that this justice and this light, that's for everybody. The point isn't just like, well, I'm gonna set these guys aside so they could go do their thing, and sorry, the rest of y'all, like, it's just not for you. It's quite the opposite. The mission here is 100%. It begins in particularism, but it is particularism for the sake of universalism.
Hmm.
It's an example for the sake of cosmic inspiration, and I think that's a very worthy mission, and I think that's the mission that we're pursuing here.
So you mentioned your time. So we have a lot of uh, Christian pastors who listen to this podcast who have no kind of real world military type experience. So what was the experience like for you to grow up and have to do your service? You, how, in what ways has that impacted you?
It was the greatest honor of my life. I think I look. I'm an immigrant to this country. I love it dearly. I chose it as my home. I believe in it. I believe it's a godly country. I believe in its divine election. I believe it's in its divine mission in the world. Um, if you ask me to point just one thing that I truly don't like about America and would change if I could, it's this: it's the notion that service to your nation is not mandatory.
mm,
I think there is something so profoundly meaningful for a young person at 17 to know that the formative years, the years of most fecundity, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, physical, will be spent in the service, sometimes perilous, of your fellow citizens and of your nation. Uh, I think it is tremendously character building. It is difficult. Until very, very, very recently, Jason, I have not been to a funeral of a person older than me. Uh,
mm,
it's a really kind of shocking thing to be able, now that I move here and I meet American friends. They're like, "Oh yeah, I've never actually been to a funeral, or maybe someone's grandmother or grandfather, God forbid." For me, losing friends was part of the pain of growing up, but also a dire reminder of the necessity of what it is that we're doing here and what we're fighting for and what we believe. It calls all these things into question in a very concrete, non-abstract, very real way, and it guides the entirety of life. Look, there was a survey done a while back that shocked a lot of people, but struck me as completely obvious. Finding Israel is one of the happiest places on earth.
mm.
Israel, constantly under terrorism, constantly under fire, fighting more wars than we care to remember. And yet, when you wake up in the morning with a heart full of faith and a mind full of clarity about who you are, what you believe in, and what it is you're put on this earth to do, you're happy, man.
Mm, mm. Is that um, is that why? Um, so, do you know we in the West and in America, do we fail to appreciate uh, the way that this will unite Israelis, despite their differences over
Oh,
political issues?
it already is in ways that make my heart just absolutely swell with tremendous pride. The things that I am seeing out of Israel. I'll give you just one small example. Tel Aviv is known as a sort of bastion of sort of liberal, secular, fun-loving city. A bunch of the city's top restaurateurs, the most famous chefs, showed up the second this started and said, "Please, we want to turn all of our kitchens kosher," which unheard of, because we want to start cooking food and we want to make sure that if there's soldiers out there who keep kosher, they can enjoy our food. So we're going to
Mm,
cook as much as we can, send it down to the front. Supermarkets all over the country now are completely empty because people just raided them and bought, all the things that they could to send down to their brothers and sisters down south. There was a gentleman
mm,
standing yesterday, a Haredi gentleman, a Chassid, standing at the counter at JFK, and said to everyone at the El Al counter in JFK, the Israeli airline, and he held up his credit card. It says, "This credit card has a cash limit of $500,000. Anyone who could show me a note from the Israeli army that he's going back to fight in this war, which is a lot of Israeli Americans, I am paying for your ticket right now."
mm.
It's an unbelievable coming together of people in the most beautiful, inspiring way. I'll tell you another story. I spoke yesterday, and
Yeah,
it's
tell me
not
all the
just
stories. These are great.
it's not just Jews. Like, I spoke yesterday with there's an elderly Bedouin guy. He's driving around. He has a van. He's a cab driver. He's driving around. It's Saturday morning. This is a Bedouin guy in his, I don't know, maybe mid 70s, um, and he sees a bunch of kids running around covered in blood, hysterical, barefoot. So he stops and picks them up and asks what had happened, and they tell him that they had been to this music festival where 260 people, we now know, were slaughtered, and that terrorists came and started shooting them. And he says to me, right then and there, I understood, like, I have to save as many of them as I could. This man drove around for almost an hour under heavy gunfire, grenades, RPGs flying like right over his head, picking up as many kids as he could, cramming them into his van, saving something like 30 or 40 lives this way. To see people coming together in this way, to see people risking their lives, to see people supporting loved ones and complete strangers. This is the secret weapon of the Israeli people and the Jewish people, and I think anyone who thought that this attack would break our spirit severely underestimated what they're up against.
So you, so you have your own experience in the military. At, at Tablet, you occupy this sort of nexus between religion and politics and culture. Um, what do you think comes next, um, as Israel responds to this attack?
Look, I obviously spent a lot of time thinking about this question. Several scenarios, sadly more than several, swirl around in my head, but I'm not being evasive when I say that I don't want to think about any of them. I think there will be time to contemplate. I think there are people much smarter than myself and much more qualified than myself seeing to these scenarios. Right now, as I see it, I have one job. There's a sentence in or a word in Hebrew that I think really is if you're looking for a pretty good distillation of the Jewish faith, here it is. It's the word zachor, remember, remember. This notion of never forgetting, this notion of keeping legacies and traditions and loved ones alive in our minds and in our hearts is extremely important. So the only thing I'm doing right now, and have been doing nothing else since Saturday, is collecting as many stories as we can of survivors, of people who lost loved ones, and people who risked their lives for saving other people. We started a website called testimoniesarchive.com. We'll be adding, sadly, more and more and more stories. Right now, we have about a dozen. These vary in length from 5 minutes to 30 minutes. They're not edited or, editorialized in any way. They're just raw recordings with people who've been through the worst in English. And we're going to add more and more and more to them because, as far as I'm concerned, the only thing I want anyone to do right now, rather than speculate or succumb to panic, I want people to do only two things. First is listen to the accounts of those who survived this atrocity. Second, and perhaps even more important, is get together and bring twice as much light into this world as there is darkness by praying really hard, by reaching out to people, to your Jewish friends or others, and seeing if they're all right, by reading and studying the Bible, by doing one more virtuous, righteous thing today than you maybe thought about doing yesterday. If we all do that, the triumph will be sweet, swift, sweet, and complete.
I was going to ask you if there were any suggestions you had for Christians listening to this to be of help. Um, but you you already you got ahead of me. But is there anything specifically that you would ask of those in the Christian community to do or be mindful of in light of this?
Well, I think it's really really easy. It really is, two or three things. The first is, call a Jewish friend. I can't tell you how touched I am when you reached out to just say, hey man, are you okay? Because it feels great, because it feels like we're all standing together in this, which I truly believe we are. Which leads me to the second thing you could do, which is double down and triple down on being great Christians, because this true and blessed faith that we have, that we share in God, and our commitment to worship God and study His Word, and commit ourselves in whatever way we understand to the teachings of our faith. Uh, that is a foundation for sheer human flourishing and goodness. And the more seriously and completely we lean into this truly, by forming strong communities, by doubling down on our learning and on our practice, by committing more and more and more to charity, by speaking out. And whenever we see these attempts at moral equivalencies and people saying, well, but what about, to stop and say, no, there is no what about. We are Christians and we believe, or we're Jews and we believe that murdering babies is wrong. And if you don't believe this, we have a problem here, a vast moral problem. That clarity of purpose, that clarity of voice, that's how we change the world.
Hmm. That, yeah. I mean, yeah. It, you make me wonder. Um, are is there a danger to how we think politically in a post-religious culture?
I think there's a danger in a post religious culture. What I'm saying is, you want to solve this, drop that post.
Okay.
America was founded, deeply and completely on the teaching of the Hebrew Bible. I have a friend, Rabbi Dr. Ari Lam, who I think who says that the Hebrew Bible is every bit America's founding moral document, as the Constitution is our founding political document. America is a godly country. It is impossible to understand anything about this nation's story if you're not deeply committed, or at the very least literate, in the Bible. And my other good friend, Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik, mentioned to me the other day how obsessed he'd become with this moment in Jeopardy, the game show in April, when the question was, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I should fear, etc. And the question was, what book in the Bible is this from? It's only one of the most famous quotes, and none of these three supposedly educated Americans could say, what are the Psalms? To be in this point, I think you have the beginning of the way out right there. If you want more good, if you want to help Jews, Christians, everyone, if you want to make this a better place, if you want to make America America again, begin with returning to origins. Reagan declared, I think it was 1983, the year of the Bible. I think we should commit to declaring every year the year of the Bible. Triple down on our study, because if we do, I think these idiotic political notions of, well, we need a da 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 da, and there's equivalency, and it's complicated, and look at the picture, that we praise ourselves for being so smart because we see all these alleged nuances in these questions. Things would grow much clearer because the Bible teaches of good and of evil, and it helps you very much to tell them apart. I think that's the beginning and pretty much also the end of the answer right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I've been thinking about it in terms of the Book of Revelation and the Old Testament. What a constant theme is the justice of God and the wrath of God against sin and evil, and the extent to which we neglect it, I think, reveals a level of privilege that previous generations didn't have.
I don't know if it's privilege as much as it is, woeful, spiritual and intellectual surrender, to unburden yourself of the foundations of your culture, irrespective of faith. You don't have to necessarily commit yourself to the principles of belief, but to not to know, to have no access to, no facility with these texts, which inspired Washington and Jefferson and Franklin to go and found this godly nation of ours. Um, I don't understand how you could be an American and don't and not have this kind of literacy. I think it is a foundational, fundamental problem. And if this atrocity, if this unbelievable, unspeakable moment of suffering could do any good, maybe the good it does is to return people to first principles and to say, like, well, I am now confronted with evil, the kinds of which the paltry theories I learned in my graduate seminar can simply not explain. I am going to seek answers elsewhere. It is my experience looking at Israeli history that that this happens frequently in Israel in times of war. Many people emerge from it with much stronger religious convictions. It's what happened in 1973 when Israel was, survived another surprise attack by Arab armies. I think very much it is what is going to happen here, but I think it may also happen here in the United States because I see so many of my friends and neighbors, many of them non-Jews, looking at this and saying, we're going to look for answers elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you used the word demon at the top of this recording, and yeah, I mean, if people just accept the text's language, it can name our experience in the world in a way that just academic theories do not.
Yeah, absolutely. And look,
Yeah.
if you do believe in God, stands to reason that you may also believe in the evil forces that are trying to topple, his kingdom. And if you do, you know how the rest of the story goes. It is your duty to find them wherever you find them, and to not tolerate them at all. We had demonstrations here in New York City supporting Hamas just the other day, in which people were
Hmm.
literally holding up phones with swastikas on them. When you see this, you say, well, the time for whataboutism or moral equivalencies or whatever kind of intellectual parlor game you want to play, those times are over. We're now speaking a much clearer, more concise language, the language of the Bible.
So Leal, what? Give me the website for the testimonies again. What was that?
Testimoniesarchive.com. Sadly, we will have more and more of those posted every day. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Jason. These are not easy stories to listen to. Some of these accounts are even for someone like me who's fought his share of wars are nearly impossible to hear without feeling some kind of breakdown. But I think we owe it to the survivors and we owe it to the victims to at least try.
Amen. Leal, thank you for your time. Stay in touch. Uh, I still owe you kosher barbecue. Um,
whatever
it's on me. So whenever you're free, I'll
whenever you come down there down here, we would love that very much, and we'd love to have you on unorthodox as planned.
you take care.
Jason, thank you so